Hey ladies and gents, welcome back. I'm just gonna pretend like I haven't disappeared for like a week, other than that weird video I ended up doing, but yeah, we're not gonna talk about that. I don't know why I decided to do that. I kind of got bored, so I was like, you know what? Make a troll video, because why not? So I ended up doing it, and yeah. So with that being said, make sure to like and subscribe. Also make sure to check out my Discord. I'll leave a link to that in the description below. With that being said, let's get right into it. This is going to be part 1 to What If Naruto Was the Dragonborn? So, something I actually do quite a bit with these types of what-ifs is introduce a new type of being, or different type of character, I guess you could say, to the world. This is obviously going to be dragons. If Naruto's a dragonborn, then there'd be a pretty good reason to assume that there would be dragons in the Naruto universe as well. I don't remember, there might have actually ended up being one. I don't remember, there might have been some like weird filler arc or something like that that had a dragon in it, but I don't remember it. So obviously I'm just going to be introducing dragons. They're obviously going to be really powerful, all things considered. You know, they're fucking dragons and everything. And in the Naruto universe, they're going to be considered somewhat of like, obviously really high tier. Most people can't learn to like summon them or do anything like that. They're really considered above everything else, above toads, above snakes, above basically any other summoning you could possibly get. So obviously they're going to be like wild creatures as well. So some weird shit is going to end up happening, and Naruto is going to have dragon blood, obviously. Like, that's just kind of how that works. If Naruto's a dragonborn, he is going to be born from a dragon, but also be part human at the exact same time. So, with that happening, Naruto would obviously be born. He'd be born with this, dragon blood, and he would actually look quite different from what you might actually assume he would look like. He obviously isn't like full-on like dragon or anything like that. He's more human than he is dragon, but Naruto's a lot paler. He has dark black hair, along with actually having horns that look pretty reminiscent of that of a dragon. People will notice this almost immediately, seeing the horns that look really reminiscent of a dragon, like I just said, and they don't know what they should think of it. They don't know if they should treat Naruto like even more of a demon, or if they should like basically look up to him as some sort of hero, as some sort of dragonkin, or something of that sort, because dragons are seen not necessarily as an evil force in the world. They're just seen as more of a mythical force, more of a really powerful good omen, I guess you could say, because they're not really bad creatures. They don't really like go around like destroying villages or anything like that. They just kind of mind their own business, so they don't really know how they should treat Naruto. They don't know exactly what they should do about this, because Naruto, I'm just gonna say this, he's not gonna have the nine tails. I'm saying that now. Naruto with the nine tails and the powers of a dragon, I don't really need that. That's just gonna make like combining abilities and make weird shit happen. So Naruto's not actually going to have the nine tails. We'll make it interesting. We'll make more of a rivalry with Naruto and Sasuke. We'll just say Sasuke ended up getting the nine tails sealed inside of him. Minato and Kushina, who aren't actually Naruto's parents in this what if, they don't actually end up having a kid. Like, Kushina has some weird shit, or I don't know exactly what's gonna happen. The nine tails will still end up attacking, everything like that. However, the person that gets the nine tails sealed inside of him would be Sasuke, after Fugaku walks up and is like, well, since I want my son to be really powerful and be my own military asset, sure, you can seal the nine tails inside of him. Minato would be like, okay, and he'd end up using the Reaper Death Seal, because Kushina at this point would be dead, or some shit like that would happen. Basically, Sasuke gets the nine tails sealed within him because I can, and I said so. So, with that happening, obviously, who exactly would Naruto's parents be? That's a good question, but it doesn't really matter. We're just gonna say they're both dead. One of them would have to be at least part dragon or something of that sort. It's a weird dynamic, because or Naruto would have to be blessed by some sort of like god or dragon god or some, I don't know. It's a complicated thing, I guess you could say, for exactly how that would happen, but that doesn't really matter all too much, because that's not really really intricate part of the actual story. It's more so the actual, not necessarily battles of it, but actually that's basically what it is. It's more so the powers that Naruto will actually gain from it, along with the differences in his personality and how people will actually end up treating him. That's gonna be the main difference here, not that it doesn't really matter that Naruto, we don't know who his parents are. It doesn't really matter all too much. We didn't know who Naruto's parents were until pretty late on in actual Naruto, like it was a few hundred episodes. So anyway, with that actually being said, let's just get into the actual, like, what if, other than backstory and explaining exactly how this is going to go. So, let's get into it. So with Naruto not actually having parents, or them being dead, or something of that sort happening, obviously, he'd be living on his own just like he was in the original, because he didn't really get sent to any, like, adoption or anything like that. He lives on his own, with Hiruzen once in a while actually ended up checking up on him. So Naruto's, like, you know, livelihood, I guess you could say, where he lives, wouldn't actually change all too much. He still likes ramen and everything like that. So, let's get into the actual differences of the story. One being, obviously, Naruto's actual appearance. Like I said earlier, he has black hair and he has horns, along with his body being a little bit more pale, with him having scales on certain parts of his body. They're not everywhere, but, like, say, like, on his shoulder or, like, on different parts of his arm. They're not everywhere, but random scales will appear, and Naruto generally tries to actually cover them up. Most people would know that Naruto is a little bit weird or a little bit different, obviously, by noticing his horns, but Naruto doesn't think they need to know everything about him. They don't need to know that he has the scales of a dragon on him as well. So, obviously, he doesn't really want them to know that, because the village already treats him kind of weirdly. He doesn't really know how he should think about it, because some villagers fear him, others look up to him. It's really weird. It's a really weird thing. Like, villagers treat him as a demon, and then another villager would walk up, treating him as some sort of omen, as some sort of hero. He doesn't know how he should feel about it. It obviously would pretty much even out, as like everybody would be, like, pretty evenly divided among everything, but most of the higher ups, the village elders and Danzo and everybody like that, think of Naruto similar to what they did in the original, as a military weapon or something of that sort. So obviously, with him being a military weapon in their eyes, he would not really be treated well by them, obviously. Danzo never really did anything with Naruto in the first place, so I don't really see why they would do anything with him here, because all it really is a pretty significant, well, like, obviously, a pretty significant increase in strength, speed. Basically, all of his stats would be increased by a pretty drastic point, but obviously, this wouldn't really change all too much, because Danzo doesn't really see Naruto as something worth it. If anything happened, Danzo basically kind of sees Naruto maybe even as a threat to the village and its future. So, he might actually come up with some kind of scheme, some kind of plot, in order to actually end up killing Naruto. Obviously, Hiruzen would not want this, and eventually he would come across Danzo's plans. He would end up stopping him from doing so. He would not put him in jail or anything like that, because he didn't have significant proof of what actually was happening, other than a few documents and some words from his different ninjas that were actually ended up spying on Danzo. He doesn't have any significant proof that Danzo has done anything, so all he does is give Danzo a warning. Not to do anything to Naruto. So, with Hiruzen actually doing that, Danzo would stop his schemes, at least for the time being, reverting back to his normal ways of killing Uchiha and everything like that. Obviously, Uchiha massacre would end up happening per usual, because, again, Sasuke was only like 6 years old, or even younger at the time that this happened. Even if he had the 9 tails, it would not actually end up being enough to stop Itachi or anything like that. Some of the Kyuubi chakra, along with the Sharingan, would end up obviously awakening, because, that massive amount of anger would cause it to do so. And Kurama would actually, at this point, start developing somewhat of a liking towards Sasuke, a lot more than he did so to Naruto. Seeing Sasuke as somewhat of a resemblance of himself, seeing him as, this hatred, he kind of appreciates that, he kind of likes it. Especially once Sasuke gets like a curse mark or something like that would happen in the future, Kurama would be pretty impressed with Sasuke, and he'd actually might develop a actual liking towards him. But for now, they're just on neutral terms. He doesn't hate him as much as he hated Naruto, because he just doesn't. It's simple as that. He didn't like Naruto's personality, at least at the start. So he obviously would like Sasuke a little bit more, and might actually end up giving him some chakra in order to help him out in certain scenarios. So Sasuke would awaken the Sharingan, just like he did in the original at this point, but he would not actually remember how to reawaken it, and he would not be able to actually end up using it. So Sasuke would actually end up being trained more as a child than he would in the original, due to him being seen completely as a weapon by his father. Nothing else, nothing more, nothing less. He's simply a weapon for the village, or rather to take down the village, I guess you could say. So he'd have more training, and he'd actually be on par with Naruto's massive increase to his physical strength and physical everything. One other thing that I did not actually mention about Naruto is his affinity with, I'm gonna say, fire magic, because, you know, why not? Naruto, or really just any magic in general, because dragons are natural creatures. They have more affinity towards natural energies, and obviously one of those natural energies would be natural energy. And natural energy can be in a variety of different forms. I'm gonna say that Naruto can basically bend the elements, I guess you could say, in a way. He's not like an avatar frickin' fire, air, whatever the fuck bender, no. He can just manipulate the natural energy around him in ways that can, you know, create different elements, with obviously those elements being the same as chakra natures: lightning, fire, wind, earth, everything like that. So with Naruto actually being able to do that, he'd have an affinity for basically all 5 different types of basically chakra natures. Most people don't actually notice this, and if anybody actually tested his, you know, affinities or chakra natures or anything like that, it would simply come up with basically nothing, because of the fact that usual creatures, like different summonings and everything like that, don't actually have chakra. They just utilize natural energy. Like summoning creatures don't actually end up having chakra, they just use natural energy, whatever it is called. Naruto would be similar to this, so whenever somebody tries to test him, they find out that Naruto doesn't actually have chakra. So he would obviously, nobody would really know what exactly he was. Nobody would know anything about him, because they don't know who his parents are. They don't know exactly what's going on with Naruto, other than the fact that he's much different from most you know, kids are, obviously, because, you know, Naruto's just different like that. He's just built different, I guess you could say. So, at around the age of, you know, the Uchiha massacre, Naruto would be much stronger than his original self, and he'd spend quite a decent amount of his time in basically recluse. He wouldn't really talk to anybody, he wouldn't really do anything with anybody. Basically, he's, you know, his own person. He's basically completely by himself at this point, similar to Sasuke, actually. So, Naruto's time would basically be half spent sleeping, eating, doing everything like that, and basically just chilling around doing nothing. The other half would be training to, you know, increase his strength, increase his affinity for nature, because obviously we don't know exactly how it would look. Like, for all we know, it could be like the weirdest thing in the world to actually have this natural connection to nature. We don't know what it would be like to be in Sage Mode. We don't know what that would feel like. We don't know what it feels like to have those connections to nature and be able to sense everything around you. We don't know what that would feel like, but like, I'm gonna say it's a really neat feeling, and Naruto, he's striving to get a better understanding of it, striving to get, it's kind of, honestly, like, it's kind of like drugs. It's like, you get that first high, and then you just, like, are striving to once again get it. That's kind of how that works, I guess you could say. Like, that's why most people recommend you don't fucking do drugs, is because, like, that's what causes, like, addictions and everything like that. The first time you do it is the best time, and after that, you're just striving to get that high once again, and you never get it, and you continue on taking the drugs and taking more and more, or taking stronger doses, and eventually it just leads to you dying, or you going to jail, or something of that sort happening. Either way, it doesn't end out good, because you lose money, you lose this, you lose that. It's really not really a good thing. However, for Naruto, it's a little bit different, because natural energy isn't really like a high, I guess you could say. It's more of just Naruto striving to achieve understanding of what exactly is going on around him. He wants to basically know. He wants to figure out what's going on, because Naruto doesn't know of his past, or not really his past. He doesn't know who his parents are. He doesn't know his ancestors. He wants to basically figure that out. And maybe he can do that if he had an even stronger connection to the nature around him. Maybe it would be able to tell him something. He obviously doesn't know that it would be able to tell him anything, but he's trying. He's striving to get this at this point. So, eventually, obviously, everybody would end up graduating from the academy, with Naruto being towards the top of his class, actually, for one reason or another. Obviously, his physical strength, his physical stamina, everything like that would be massively increased. However, one actual reason why he was not at the very top of his class is obviously Sasuke, because Sasuke got more training, so he'd be stronger. But the actual main reason, Naruto could easily defeat Sasuke in a fight. However, the main reason that Naruto didn't place, like, all too high in his class, I'm actually gonna, like, retcon what I just said. He's probably more in the middle somewhere, because he's really intelligent and he's really strong. But, for all people know, Naruto only has the elemental affinities. He hasn't been able to learn different techniques, like he can't learn the clone jutsus, because Naruto doesn't actually have chakra. He has basically this weird way of manipulating the natural energy to create different elements. He can't actually, like, make clones or do anything like that, meaning that most of their little tests, Naruto wouldn't be able to anywhere get near passing, even worse so than in the original, because Naruto just straight up doesn't have chakra. He wouldn't be able to create those different things. So Naruto would actually graduate, we're gonna say, in the high middle tier, I guess you could say, of his class, with Sasuke being at the very top, having even better grades, and even better strength, even better chakra control than he would in the original, meaning that he's obviously way up at the actual top of the class. So who exactly is Naruto going to be placed on a squad with? Well, it's going to obviously be 2 other people along with a sensei. That's kind of just how that kind of stuff works. However, who exactly are those people going to be, and who is his teacher? Obviously, it could be Kakashi, if Naruto is on the same team as Sasuke, but Sasuke is going to be placed on Team Kakashi for 2 reasons. 1, Sharingan, 2, the 9 tails within him, and the Sharingan can actually kind of at least somewhat control that, meaning that he's going to be placed on Team 7 with Kakashi. So, now let's get into how the rest of the actual teams are going to work. Now, I'm not actually going to end up messing with Ino Chikasho. There's a reason that's a thing, and there's a reason that happened. It's a really good combination of techniques and attacks, meaning that the Leaf Village would not actually end up changing that just because Naruto's different. So that's obviously not going to change. So we'll cover Team Kakashi actually first. So obviously one of them is Sasuke. Another will be Sakura, just because, keep it the same, she's in the middle. And the other will be someone who's actually towards the bottom of the actual class, that being Naruto. There's actually a reason I'm doing this. Obviously Kiba or somebody else towards the bottom of the class could also be placed on that spot, but there is actually a reason I'm doing this, because of the fact that, remember earlier I stated that the rivalry between Naruto and Sasuke would actually be increased from what it was in the original. Well, you can't really have that if they're on completely different teams. It just simply doesn't really work all too well. So they're going to be placed on the same team, not necessarily for plot convenience, but more so for the fact that I literally stated that earlier and I don't feel like doing a retcon of that. So, anyway, with that being said, Kakashi would end up taking them all up to the rooftop, and they do their introductions with Kakashi doing his first. Sasuke would end up doing his, and it would be pretty much the same. He'd be even darker than he would be in the original, due to never really having that family connection that he did before. He, obviously, the only really love he truly felt was from his brother Itachi, but obviously that disappeared pretty quickly. He never really got any actual admiration from his father, because, again, he was just seen as a weapon to him. He didn't really get any admiration from anybody, really. So he obviously wouldn't have any of those past good memories, meaning that he'd be even darker than he would be in the original. Having literally no other goal, no other motives other than revenge, he doesn't think about anything else. This is obviously part of the reason that Kurama would actually kind of like Sasuke. But, yeah. Anyway, Sakura would actually be coming up next, and she obviously would be pretty similar to herself in the original. She thinks Sasuke's hot, and that's the only reason she liked him in the original, especially at this point. Even in the end, to be honest with you, Chief. What reason did she have to like him? He tried to kill you multiple times. Bitch. God damn. I'm just saying. So anyway, Sakura's would obviously be exactly the same, and Naruto's would actually be coming up next. And Naruto hasn't really thought much about his goals at this point in his life. All he's done is train and be by himself. And he just looks at Kakashi now. He seems deep in thought. Because he's thinking about it. He doesn't actually know the answer to this question. He doesn't have those straightforward goals that he had in the original of becoming Hokage, becoming this. And the village itself didn't really necessarily hate him completely. It was basically mixed, half and half. meaning that Naruto didn't really feel the need to actually end up proving himself. He simply looks forward at Kakashi, with this deep look in his eye that seems to say, I don't know. And Kakashi obviously would be pretty pissed by this because, kind of similar to what Boruto did, he gets really... He's like a ninja without a goal. That's simply not how this works. Naruto's like, well, come up with a goal later, but I don't have one as of now. There's nothing really I'm striving for. I don't have friends. I don't have a family. I don't have any goals or ambitions. So, what would I strive for? And Kakashi's kind of taken aback by this. He's like, he didn't know anything about Naruto. All he knew is that he had horns, and he's kind of like the recluse of the village. He didn't know he didn't have a family. He didn't know he didn't have parents. He didn't know that some of the village actually even hated him. He didn't really pay too much attention to him. He wasn't the son of his mentor. He wouldn't pay attention. So he's kind of concerned by this. He's hoping that Naruto doesn't turn to the dark side. He's hoping that freaking Star Wars reference right there. So he basically is thinking about this, and he's like, well, it's really interesting. Before basically trying to move on, trying not to talk too much more about this conversation, he basically tells him to meet him in the morning, and he'll explain exactly what they're doing there. Don't eat anything. So he ends up leaving, and everybody ends up going to bed for that night before waking up, not eating, and showing up at the location of the bell test, of which Kashi would arrive late, and everybody would honestly be getting kind of hungry at this point. He'd state exactly what they're doing, and everybody would be pretty angry at the fact that they didn't eat yet, and the bell test would actually end up beginning, and with that happening, Naruto would end up staying out. He's pretty confident in his own abilities, just like he would be in the original, except even more so, because he's stronger. He hasn't really had to fight anybody other than, different academy students, one of them being Sasuke, and every time he fought him, he would actually either be a really good match for him, or he'd end up winning in their fight. So he's pretty confident in his own abilities to actually end up winning. Everybody else goes and hides, obviously. This includes Sasuke, who is confident in his own abilities, but he's generally just more intelligent than Naruto would actually end up being. So Naruto would end up beginning his fight, and with that happening, he'd charge forward towards Kakashi, wheeling back his hand and, forming out to throw a punch, with Kakashi noticing Naruto's speed is really high for even somebody like a Chunin. He would basically try to dodge this attack, but as he's doing that, he notices it. This is just a feint. Naruto's other hand is coming up from, his rear out of his basically the blind spot in his eye. But he obviously manages to dodge this. He's Kakashi. He dodges out of the way. But he's pretty impressed by Naruto. Naruto's, different fighting techniques for not actually... He doesn't know this, but Naruto hasn't really actually fought anybody. All of his, different abilities are self-trained or by fighting beasts in the forest and stuff like that. So Naruto would once again charge forward, knowing that in a fight, if you were on the back end, if you're not pushing forward at all times, you'd be at a disadvantage. Kakashi would notice this and realize that Naruto might actually be better than he thought at this whole fighting thing. Naruto leaps forward, and he's similar to Broly, I guess you could say. He's just wildly throwing punches, and Kakashi notices this, and notices that Naruto doesn't actually have that massive amount of actual fighting training that he actually would in the original. He's been thinking about it, but most of the fights he's actually done were just easy, one-sided claps against other academy students. By his massive increase in strength over them, he could just basically one-shot them. But other than that, he hasn't really actually had any, challenge. So as this fight continues on, Naruto's battle, basically, experience and everything like that would be increasing. Similar to, like Broly or something like that from the Dragon Ball movie, he'd be throwing punches, and they'd get more precise, more accurate, and even more powerful. Kakashi would be noting this, and he'd be barely able to dodge out of them before he'd actually have to block them. But then, after he had to start blocking them, he noticed the absolute massive amount of force behind each and every punch. It'd be enough to knock him out if it hit him. He notes this, or if it hit him in the head or something of that sort. He notes this and notices that he's going to have to actually get serious now. So he basically backs up, basically holding up his hand as Naruto to stop. Naruto would, listening to his sensei, and Kakashi basically lifts up his headband. And he tells Naruto, looking up, "I respect you, So, I'll show you my true power, revealing his Sharingan, obviously. Sasuke would be pretty surprised and impressed by this at the exact same time, and start forming up theories in his head as to why Kakashi actually, had a Sharingan. Why is this a thing? So with him doing that, obviously, he'd be theorizing all these different ideas in the back of his head, theorizing that maybe he had something to do with the Uchiha Massacre, and this and that. Basically, all these theories would be going through his head, and Naruto would continue on fighting with Kakashi, who Naruto at this point would be at a pretty decent disadvantage, because obviously, Kakashi gained a pretty massive boost from, taking out his Sharingan, along with being able to much easier dodge Naruto's punches. But just like at the beginning of the fight, Naruto would begin adapting to the strength difference between them. He'd start increasing his own strength. His punches would once again get more precise, more accurate, and he would actually start landing blows on Kakashi, who's unable to dodge or block them at this point. Most of his punches wouldn't be anywhere near fatal, or not fatal, sorry, but near good, clean hits, because Kakashi would dodge those, but every once in a while a punch would reach, his gut, or part of his chest, or his leg, something of that sort, and he'd feel it every single time. He'd feel the massive amount of force behind every single punch as it hit him. He realizes he's not going to be able to hold back at all in this fight anymore. So, basically, he starts fighting at complete full power, taking out his kunai and not necessarily going for the kill. He is going to incapacitate Naruto. He could be healed later on, but he can't really be embarrassed by this Genin. He knows he can't. That shouldn't be a thing that should be happening right now. That can't exist. He doesn't want that to happen. So he gets completely serious at this point and starts throwing kunai at Naruto. Naruto would be dodging out of the way of these pretty easily after the massive amount of adapting he's done in this fight and able to dodge and everything like that at these increased speeds. He dodges out of the way of all these different attacks. But as Naruto keeps running forward, he feels a sharp pain in his knee. He looks down. He sees there's a kunai literally impaled in his knee. With Naruto looking down at the kunai currently lodged inside of his knee, he'd fall down to one knee. And he'd be, it obviously fucking hurts. And at this point, Naruto would pull the kunai out of his knee before beginning to try to stand back up again. The pain in his knee would be really great, but Kakashi notices it, along with Naruto. Naruto noticed that he used to basically regenerate pretty quickly, but he never really got any serious injuries, and he's looking at this now as the wound quickly closes, and the blood seemingly just goes back into his body. He's looking at that. He's like, what? He stands back up, and the pain in his knee is almost completely gone, before finally disappearing, seconds later. With that happening, Naruto's confused. He's taken aback by this. But Sasuke doesn't really know what's happening right now. All he sees is that Naruto seems to be injured, so he jumps in and begins to fight Kakashi. With him doing that, he's basically looking around at this point, and he sees that Naruto's standing back up again, and the place where the kunai went into Naruto's knee doesn't seem to be injured anymore. He's kind of weirded out by this, but he then signals for Naruto to join him, because he can't really defeat Kakashi as this continues. He obviously can't. He's just not able to at this point. So, Naruto would once again join back in the fight, and they'd start using teamwork to try to take on Kakashi. During this fight, I'm going to say Sasuke awakens the Sharingan, due to one reason or another, one being the gap between he and Kakashi's strength, or I guess 3 reasons, I guess you could say. His increase in training, meaning that he'd basically have more understanding of how it would work, and 3, the difference in his strength and Naruto's, and him wanting to basically reduce that gap. He would end up awakening the Sharingan, completely getting rid of that gap, if not surpassing it, making it so that he's slightly stronger than Naruto. They would easily defeat Kakashi, and we'll say Sakura joined in there at some point too, not really doing anything, but she did enough to consider to make it so that Sakura, Kakashi, I don't know what the fuck I'm trying to say right now, would actually be like, yeah, sure, good enough teamwork, Sakura, good enough. So they all end up, becoming Genin at this point. I almost said Chunin. I don't know why I almost said Chunin, but, you know, I did. So they all become Genin, and they would end up starting their D-rank missions, and I don't really see a reason to cover them. Nothing really happens with the D-rank missions. Oh, I'm gonna go catch a cat. I'm gonna pick up garbage around a lake. Nobody wants to cover them. They're just as boring for me to talk about and for you to listen as it is for Naruto or the rest of his team to actually do them, so there's no reason to cover them. They do their D-rank missions. That's all I really have to say about that. I don't really know why I'm explaining it other than for the fact that, you know, I am. So, with them, you know, doing their D-rank missions, they would actually be bored of these. They'd go to Hiruzen and they'd be asking for a higher rank mission, who would end up giving them the same mission that he would in the original, to guide a bridge builder named Tazuna. So with them doing that, he tells them that the mission will actually start in a week, and they have a week of free time. They are done with all their D-rank missions, and they can do what they want with it. Train, socialize, you know, they can do whatever they can do whatever they want to their heart's desire. So with that actually happening, everybody would, you know, they'd be doing their things, and you guys might be wondering, was there a week before that actually happened? I don't fucking know. I don't know if that's a thing. I'm just doing this for convenience? Question mark? I have to develop something, I guess you could say. That's the best way to put it, I'd say. So, Naruto, just like what he does on most days, normal occasions, he'd end up going in the woods. He'd be training, and he'd basically be training his physical strength, along with honing some of the different techniques and everything like that he learned against Kakashi in their actual fight, because Naruto learned a lot in their fight, and developed a lot of new different abilities that he might actually be able to use later on in the future. So, some of these abilities obviously just being increased strength, increased speed, everything like that. His punches and everything like that are much more precise. He's, you know, better able to dodge. Basically everything about Naruto's increased, but something that he actually learned to do during their fight, but that he did not want to use because, you know, he didn't, is the ability to control the natural energy around him. He has been trying to do this for literal years at this point, but during their fight, this weird epiphany kind of struck upon Naruto. Naruto, at this point, would begin trying to actually use this. He didn't want to use it against Kakashi, he didn't want to accidentally kill him or anything like that. He wanted to test it first. He didn't know exactly what it was. So, with him doing that, he begins focusing his mind before basically looking at a tree. He begins focusing on it. As the tree slowly would actually begin to develop this black ash around it, this black mark, before a small spark would strike, and then a small fire would begin forming around it. Naruto realizes that he doesn't want to start a forest fire or anything of that sort, and begins focusing once again. As a small stream of water basically appears where Naruto wanted it to, extinguishing the fire. Naruto realizes this is a really good thing. He might actually be able to use this to his advantage. Now that he knows that his abilities are relatively weak, the next week would be developed around training this. However, around, we'll say 4 days in, maybe 5 days in, Naruto is met by a strange figure that he's never met before in the woods. It's a black-haired girl who ends up walking up to Naruto. No, this is not Hinata. Just so you guys know, no, it's not Hinata. So, with this girl walking up to towards Naruto, Naruto would be nowhere near on guard. He's training, he's down doing push-ups or something of that sort. He's not focused anywhere near on this girl, or he's focused on, like, using his natural energy. He's basically he's training at this point. He's absurdly focused on whatever he's doing and not paying attention to anything around him. But as this happens, this girl would walk up towards Naruto and poke him on the back. As Naruto's surprised, because obviously he wasn't expecting this, he turns around. He's actually met by a pretty beautiful face. He wasn't expecting to see somebody actually, you know, a person out here. He's kind of surprised by this. But then Naruto's eyes start wandering. No, I'm not talking about something bad here. Naruto looks up a little bit from where he was looking before, and he sees it. Black horns. He's wondering exactly what this is, why she has horns, and he simply just asks her, why do you have horns? What are those about? The girl would look at Naruto now, and she'd actually be noticing the horns on Naruto as well. Naruto's down on the ground at this point, or before, and she didn't actually notice this, because Naruto was doing push-ups, like I just said. All she saw was somebody, you know, training out in the forest, and she wanted to see what they were doing. But now she notices this, and she gets surprised. There's another one of her kind. Naruto's surprised to hear this. He's kind of curious what exactly this is. Maybe this could answer a lot of his questions about his past. So he starts questioning her. who are her parents, and what is this, what is that. But the girl kind of has a similar story to Naruto, just from a different village. Her parents are dead, she doesn't know who they are, and she's just kind of come out here to train, and she doesn't know why, she just kind of has the urge to. She just kind of feels at home with the nature, and doesn't really want to leave. Naruto basically notes this, and he's like, it's really similar to why I'm here. That's kind of exactly the reason why I'm here. She would look at Naruto now, and she'd just nod at him, and Naruto, he just nod back and be like, yeah. So sad. So, oh my life. I don't know what I'm trying to do anymore. But anyway, Naruto would actually, he asks the girl, what village are you from? And she answers, she's like, oh, I'm not from a ninja village or anything like that. I'm just from this small, little like farming village out not too far from the Leaf Village. And Naruto would ask her, you want to become a ninja? And she looks at him, she's like, wait, what? And Naruto's like, I mean, you're pretty strong. I mean, like, you look pretty strong. Can you show me what you can do? You said you've been training for a while. She's like, sure, I will. You want to arm wrestle? And Naruto's like, sure, why not? They go over to a log, and they would actually end up arm wrestling. With them doing that, Naruto, at least at first, would have a massive and very clear, he just has a massive and clear advantage in the thing. But he notes that the girl has really similar strength to what he had before he actually had his fight with Kakashi, and that they would have been much more even before that had actually happened. And he notes that she's actually really strong, probably around, if she actually had any amount of fighting experience, he'd be on her level. And he notes this, and he's like, yeah, you're definitely strong enough to become a ninja. You're really powerful, actually, as a matter of fact. She's like, oh, wait, what, really? Naruto's like, yeah. You want to come back to the Leaf Village with me, and we can go ask Hiruzen if you can join my squad, or maybe you can just join and nobody will question it. So with that happening, they'd end up returning back to the actual Leaf Village itself. With them doing so, they end up going to Hiruzen, and Naruto introduces her, explaining what she did, and explaining how that she's at a similar level of strength and everything like that towards Naruto, but doesn't actually have the same or any fighting experience similar to what Naruto did. And, well, actually, literally just none, because she never joined an academy or anything like that. Hiruzen would be looking at her and be like, yeah, I'll let you do it, but you have to spend just like a month or so. Well, not too long, just like a month or so in the academy, and just to, hone some of your different abilities, or really just as long as it takes for you to graduate, which, imagining by your strength, I don't imagine will actually take too long. Naruto's kind of saddened by this because she's not going to be able to come on the mission with him, but he knows that she's pretty happy to hear this, and that makes Naruto happy as well, knowing that he actually ended up helping somebody. And he thinks about this. He's like, it felt good to help people, and he's wondering why exactly that is. He's never really had to help people before, but he realized that this is a nice feeling, and he wanted more of it. He wants to help people more. He wants that satisfaction. He wants that pride, that knowledge that he actually did something important. So, with him doing that, the week would actually end up passing by, and they'd actually begin their mission. Naruto would, say bye to his new friend, who I'm actually going to name Kohaku, because I can, so don't question me. So, anyway, Naruto would actually end up leaving the village. With him leaving the village, he'd obviously be going on the mission that he would be, normally. He would obviously not notice the puddle. There's no reason for him to be able to notice it. He's lacking the proper battle experience. However, when the two demon brothers, two Chunin, whatever the fuck you want to call them, would actually end up attacking, Naruto and Sasuke would both individually take out one of them with basically little to no difficulty whatsoever. They pretty easily take them down without Kakashi having to, come back and interfere in the battle. With Naruto actually noticing that Kakashi didn't actually die in this, what if, along with Sasuke, who Kakashi's actually pretty impressed by both of them. He wasn't expecting them to know that. So they'd continue on walking until eventually they would obviously come across Zabuza. With that happening, the mist would obviously roll overhead because, that's kind of just like what happens. And with that mist rolling overhead, Kakashi basically tells them, he's like, you guys won't be able to see anything in this, including you, Sasuke. Your Sharingan is not advanced enough to be able to see through this. You guys just stay here until this mist is gone, and then I'll consider you guys, fighting. But for now, just defend Kazuna. They obviously would agree to this. They respect Kakashi enough to allow him to, to listen to him. And Kakashi would have his confrontation with Zabuza. However, when Zabuza would jump in the middle of his fight, and, the group of the four of them, he would jump in the middle of it. He'd be about to slash down. However, Kakashi would not even move. Zabuza would be wondering exactly why this is. But then, Zabuza feels a sharp pain. He didn't even see anybody move. What is that? He looks down and he sees that there's blood coming out of his lower left of his gut, and he sees that Naruto is there with a kunai. Also, with his, two kunai, I guess you could say. One shanking Zabuza in his gut, the other actually blocking the sword. He's wondering how exactly he even blocked the sword. That shouldn't be possible for the amount of strength that Zabuza has. With Naruto now doing this, the mist would actually be gone at this point, and Naruto would begin slashing his kunai towards, basically, Zabuza. Pretty easily, as a matter of fact, he'd begin cutting him left and right. Just little scratches, because most of them Zabuza would be able to dodge, or at least mostly dodge. However, Zabuza would be getting dealt a lot of blows. He'd be bleeding from a lot of different places, but they'd mostly just be small cuts. Naruto would once again return to guarding, Tazuna, because he was told to, and Kakashi would give a thumbs up towards Naruto, knowing that Naruto did a really good job with that, knowing he defended the person that he was supposed to be defending, and then retreated once he realized that he got too far away from him to continue protecting him. He would note that Naruto actually did a really, really good job there, and he would continue on fighting Zabuza, who would actually be weakened at this point a little bit slower, and would actually end up being defeated by Kakashi, after Kakashi would take out his Sharingan, obviously. He never gets trapped inside of a water prison or anything like that. That actually never happens. However, Haku would still end up jumping in, taking Zabuza and taking him back to his original location. Or, taking him, pretending to kill him, everything like that. That happens normally. With that happening, I don't know what I'm trying to say anymore. I don't know. So, anyway, with that actually, happening just like it would per usual, some time would pass by and everybody would arrive at Tazuna's house, and they'd begin resting there with Kakashi ended up still having to use his Sharingan. Everybody would go and train, and they'd begin trying to water walk and do everything like that. Naruto would actually end up being able to learn this because he can just use the natural energy around him to allow him to walk on everything like that, so he actually ends up learning this pretty quickly, pretty easily as a matter of fact. So with him pretty easily learning all of those different things, more time would actually pass by. Most of this time, Naruto spent physical training along with training for his elemental abilities, which he actually improved quite dramatically from the time that he could barely ignite a fire at this point. He can create massive fireballs along with massive water balls, and he can create, different walls of earth and everything like that. He has not been able to manifest lightning or wind at this point just yet, but he's hoping to be able to do that sometime in the near future. So they'd end up going back to the bridge, and with them going back to the bridge, obviously, they would have their next confrontation with Zabuza. So with them having their confrontation with Zabuza, they would pretty easily begin defeating him. Haku would have no chance against literally anybody there except for Sakura, and Zabuza would have 3 different rivals that all are at a similar strength to his own. So they would all be pretty easily defeated, no matter what happened here. And I'm going to say Sasuke's Sharingan evolved to the 2-Tomo Sharingan, making him actually have he has an advantage over Naruto at this point. For the time being, that is. Slight advantage, just in terms of actually dodging capabilities and everything like that. He has increased speed and, reaction time, whereas Naruto has better strength. All in all, he has a slight bit of an advantage over Naruto, just the smallest amount, not much at all. So, with that happening, they never have that moment where Sasuke has to sacrifice himself or anything like that. That never actually happens. So, they would end up returning back to the village, just like they do in the original. With them returning back to the village, Naruto's first, goal, it wouldn't be, I'm gonna go get ramen, I'm gonna go do this. He's gonna go ask his new friend, Kohaku, how exactly school is going. So he walks up to her and he begins asking questions about how school is going. She answers pretty casually, just oh yeah, it's going well. I'm more than halfway there actually already. I'm almost done. So some more time would actually end up passing by, and Naruto would end up getting, or not getting recommended, sorry, but Kakashi would end up recommending that he and the rest of Team 7 would actually, do the Chunin exams, and they'd be pretty excited by this. And around this time, Kohaku would actually be graduating from the academy, and she would actually be able to actually take part in this, meaning that she has enough training, I guess you could say, to become a Ganin, and she's placed on Team 7 with the rest of them. So, with that actually, happening, they would basically begin the Chunin exams, starting with the written exams. Everybody would pass pretty easily, because everybody is much more intelligent than their original selves, and Kohaku is also pretty intelligent, along with, the rest of everybody, because, she just is, because, why not? So, everybody, with everybody passing that part of the exams pretty easily, the Forest of Death would start. However, that's where I'm going to leave this part off. I hope you guys liked the fact that I made like a 40-minute long video, or more than that. Let me know what you guys think. If you guys want me to do more of this, I'll consider it. Yeah, I'll see you guys in the next part. Peace out. Bye.